Hei kaikki, tervetuloa. Mä tulin tähän ihan vaan sen verran lavalle käymään, että toivotan kaikki tervetulleeksi Intokustannuksen puolesta. Ja esittelen meidän haastattelijaa Heidi Kivekäs, eläinoikeusjärjestö Animalian toiminnanjohtaja. Ja hän puhuu tosiaan Philip Lumberyn kanssa, joka on kirjoittanut kirjan 60 Satoa Jäljellä.
Kiitos. Lähtikö toi tarkoituksella pois toi ruudunjako? Joo. No niin, kiitos ja tervetuloa munkin puolesta. Mä oon tosiaan Heidi Kivekäs, Animalian toiminnanjohtaja ja on tosi hienoa olla täällä mukana tässä tilaisuudessa. Ja mä aloitan tässä suomeksi, mutta sitten kun mennään siihen haastatteluosuuteen, niin puhutaan sitten englanniksi Philipin kanssa. Ja myöhemmin on mahdollisuus myös yleisöllä kysellä kysymyksiä ja silloin jos haluatte, niin mä voin myös sitten kääntää kysymykset englanniksi, mutta vastaus tulee sitten vaan sillä yhdellä kielellä. Siihen ei varmaan aika ihan riitä nytten, mutta voidaan katsoa sitten vaikka jälkikäteen, että jos on jotain niin kuin kysymyksiä, mitä jäi mietityttämään, niin voidaan siitä keskustella sitten. Ja tosiaan Animalia on eläinoikeuksia edistävä kansalaisjärjestö ja me työskennellään erityisesti turkiseläinten, koe-eläinten ja ruoantuotannossa kasvatettujen eläinten puolesta. Ja meidän visiona on maailma, jossa jokainen eläinyksilö voi elää hyvää elämää elinvoimaisella maapallolla. Ja eläinoikeusjärjestönä me tietysti kyseenalaistetaan eläinten käyttäminen ruuaksi ja kannustetaan ihmisiä tekemään hyviä valintoja, eläinystävällisiä valintoja lautasillaan. Ja mulla onkin tänään tosiaan suuri kunnia haastatella Philip Lumberyä, joka on tehnyt vuosikymmeniä töitä eläinten hyvinvoinnin parantamiseksi ja ruokajärjestelmän muutoksen edistämiseksi. Philip on yli 40 maassa toimivan tuotantoeläinten hyvinvointia ajavan Compassion in World Farming International -järjestön toiminnanjohtaja ja vieraileva professori Winchesterin yliopistossa. Hän on myös yli 100 eläinasiajärjestön kattojärjestön Eurogroup for Animalsin puheenjohtaja. Ja hän on ollut perustamassa World Federation for Animals-järjestöä. Lumbery on uransa aikana toiminut erityisesti erilaisilla kansainvälisillä areenoilla eläinten hyvinvoinnin ja ruokajärjestelmien asiantuntijana, mukaan lukien Euroopan unionissa ja YK:ssa. Hän on omistautunut eläinten puolestapuhuja, luonnontieteilijä, valokuvaaja ja palkittu kirjailija. Ja häneltä on aiemmin ilmestyneet teokset Farmageddon ja Dead Zone, jotka molemmat Into on kustantanut suomen kielellä, julkaissut suomen kielellä. So it's a great honor to welcome you, Philip, via online link to Helsinki. Welcome.
Hi, great to be with you. Thank you.
I have just introduced you to the audience in Finnish. How are you today?
I am very, very well. My only regret is that I'm not in person in Helsinki. I love Helsinki. I cannot wait to be back in the autumn and saying hi to you all and in Finland. Sorry I can't be there in person.
Well, we look forward to seeing you at the Helsinki Book Fair in October. Everyone can make a note now that that's the place to meet you in person. You have a short presentation prepared, so please go ahead, Philip.
Thank you so much, and big thanks to Into for supporting 60 Harvests Left, the third in the Farmageddon trilogy. And this book very much is about the need for animals, people and the planet to move to soil-friendly farming practices, which sounds quite mundane, but actually is huge. Just before this meeting, just literally 20 minutes ago, I was talking to the United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, and talking to her about the need to move to soil-friendly, soil-healthy farming practices exactly for that, for animals, people and the planet. And I want to take you through why I say that. And I think the first thing to say is that when we look at our society, whether it be in Finland or in the rest of Europe or the rest of the world, when we look at our society through the lens of the four seasons, then we can see that we are in our summertime. A time of endless consumption, of parties, of eating and drinking as if the world has no boundaries. But what we can see is that autumn is starting to loom. We can see the autumnal browning of the leaves starting to happen with climate change and the decline in nature. Carry on as we are, eating and drinking and producing food in the way that we are at the moment, and we can see that our society could slip into a perpetual winter. Now, we all got a taste of that perpetual winter during COVID, a time when we could see that our society was vulnerable, was something we shouldn't take for granted, was something that we had to look after. So do we want to slip into that perpetual winter? Or do we want to set a course for a new springtime? A time where life can again be beautiful for now and the future. Well, the great news is that we can set a course for that springtime, and that there are beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions already at hand that can take us there. Let me take you on that journey to that new springtime. And first of all, let me introduce you to my writing companion. This is my dear, beloved Duke. He was, I'm very sad to say, he was my four-legged love of my life. He passed away more than a year ago. But during our time together, 12 years together, he was a rescue dog. We walked the fields and the woodlands around our home every single day. And we were able to see farming in its very best and also in its not so good. We lived next door to 40 cows. These were our neighbours, and our cows were grazing the fields and wandering the river valley next door, living life as it should be lived. But we saw other things that were not so good, and one of those things I will remember always. Duke and I were out on a spring morning, and there was a tractor pulling a plough. Up and down the field the tractor went, and there was dust coming up around the tractor and catching the sunlight, giving it an aura. I couldn't help but think that this was a classic farming scene. It's gone on for decades, probably centuries, in one shape or form. But as I watched, I thought, hang on, there's something wrong. There was something missing. As the tractor was going up and down, there were no birds following it. Nothing following the plough. And the reason for that, I came to see, was when the soil was upturned and you looked at it, you could see that there were no worms or bugs or beetles. It was lifeless. It was sand. Duke and I could have been walking on the moon. Now, that field was being prepared to grow maize, so corn, a lot of which is used for animal feed, and it's grown using chemical pesticides and fertilizers. So essentially factory farming of crops. And it reminded me of the factory farming of that very same crop that I saw in the heartland birthplace of what I've come to know of as factory farming. I saw it in the Midwest of America, and I remember walking through those cornfields and getting to a feedlot where hundreds of cattle were crowded together in grassless pens. Not a blade of grass anywhere to be seen. And I remember watching them as they were standing without any shade in the relentless sun. And I looked at those animals and I looked into their eyes and I saw their desperation as they jostled to try to get in each other's shadows to get some respite from the sun. Factory farming has two sides. That's what I learned then. I also know very well that factory farming comes in multi-species facets in Finland and other parts of Europe, America and the world. Hens kept in cages so small they can't stretch their wings. Pigs, mother pigs kept in crates where they can't turn around for weeks at a time and are made to face the wall. Dairy cows taken out of green pastures and put into mega dairies. And feedlots for beef cattle. This is a picture that I took during COVID of one in the Midwest of America. And those tiny little dots, they're all cows on a feedlot with about 100,000 cows in one place. Factory farming, I've come to realise, has two sides. The first is the one which so many of us know about, which is where the animals are caged, crammed and confined in what looks like a space-saving idea, but actually isn't. Because by taking them off of pasture and out of woodlands and fields and putting animals in these cages, we then have to use vast acreages of arable land elsewhere, be it in Finland, other parts of Europe, or in the Amazon of Brazil, to grow their feed, soya, corn, wheat, and so on. And when we do that, when we produce that feed in those industrial ways that I saw being done on that day, that spring day, what happens is the fields, they get bigger. As the fields get bigger, then the trees, the bushes and the hedges disappear. Then the chemical pesticides and fertilizers come in. And so the weeds that provide the seeds and the insects that are needed, they disappear too. Meaning that the birds, the bats, the bees and everything else so disappear, leaving you with the crop. And then we take that crop, soya, corn, wheat, and we feed it to the factory farmed animals, who then waste the vast majority of the food value in both calories and protein in conversion to factory farmed meat, milk and eggs. In this way, we waste enough food to feed 4 billion people. That's half of humanity alive today. So when people say, how are we going to feed the growing population? How are we going to satisfy hunger around the world? Well, there is one answer. End factory farming. Let us continue. We need that one answer. End factory farming to feed the world, but also to preserve our ability to feed the world in the future. Because what is happening, as we saw in that field with that tractor that day, is that by industrially producing crops devoid of animals on the land, we're destroying the soil. And that is why the United Nations has warned, carry on as we are. And we have just 60 harvests left in our soil. That means 60 years left before the soil needed to grow our food is gone. And then what? Game over. So change is inevitable. No one can guarantee what the future looks like, but I can guarantee one part of what it looks like, and that is that it won't look the way it is now. Change is inevitable. And I see the way that we need to change is by embracing beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions that I sum up as 3 R's: regeneration, rethinking protein, and rewilding. Let me explain further. Regeneration is about bringing back soil health, exactly as I was explaining to the UN's Deputy Secretary General not half hour ago. Regeneration means taking animals out of factory farms and putting them back on the land as part of mixed rotational farming systems where they become part of the environment again and where they can live their best life within a farming scenario. I'll give you an example of one farm which used to be a factory farm. This farm that you can see, the farm was losing money and its yield was declining because its soil was destroyed. So what did this farmer do? He brought animals back onto the land, free ranging. And now his cattle are rotating around the farm, following the crops. And the cattle are followed by sheep, who are followed by pigs, and are followed by these chickens in a beautiful symphony of life. And it's harmonious because the cattle, they like to eat long grass. And then the sheep eat shorter grass. And then when the grass gets really short, then the chickens go in and they love really short grass. But as you can see from this photo, actually the sheep on this particular year, they didn't do a very good job. So the grass is a bit long. But hey, the chickens don't seem to be minding. The second R is rethinking protein, because whichever way we look at it, globally we are eating too much meat and dairy, not just for our health, but also for planetary boundaries. We are breaking the global system and causing meltdown through climate change, the collapse of nature, and so on. So whichever way we look at it, we do need to rethink our protein. We do need to move to more plant-based diets, reducing our overall meat and dairy in Europe by about 70%, which we can do by more plants, but also moving to new and innovative proteins such as cultivated meat produced from stem cells, or protein produced by something called precision fermentation, which is very much like producing bread and wine using programmed microbes that can produce precise proteins. The third R is rewilding the soil. And this is very much about getting animals back where they belong, out of factory farms, fewer of them, but keeping them entirely free-ranging. And in this way, they can help bring back the vitality that is needed for healthy soil. Every soccer pitch, every football pitch size of farmland should have up to 4 million worms. It should have 13,000 species of life per hectare, which adds up. If you were to draw all of that life out and to weigh it, it would weigh a total of 5 tons. That's the equivalent to an African elephant. So when I talk about rewilding the soil, I talk about let's bring back the elephant. Not literally elephants, fun as that would be, but the elephant's way to biodiversity that should be under each hectare size patch of soil. How do we do that? By farming in a way which mixes it up, a rich diversity of crops rotationally, keep it covered up so that the soil doesn't get blown away or washed away by the rain, leave it the right way up. So actually, don't plough the soil at all, would be the best way, and leave the worms in their homes the right way up. And the other way is to turbo boost the restoration of the soil by getting animals out of factory farms and back onto the pastures and the woodlands. So rewilding, bringing back the elephant, can be a wonderful way forward for us. And why should we be doing this now? Well, because the time for change is now. That's not just something which I'm saying, that's something which was put into a report by food and farming leaders from all across the European Union. It was a report that was commissioned by this lady, President Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. And that report made it clear that factory farming, taking animals off the land, is causing unintended consequences, driving climate and environmental crisis, and that actually farmers are the first to fundamentally feel the effects. They're the victims. At the same time, changing the way we farm can play a big role in the solutions. That sustainable agriculture is an extremely important instrument to creating a better world. And that business as usual is not an option. So actually, I wrote 60 Harvests Left. I wrote it. It was launched in the English version in 2022. What I'm pleased to say is in the intervening time, the principles that I set out, the urgency of the crisis, is something which others have started to embrace, which is really important because we do face a crisis of climate, of nature, of pollution, of ill health. The way for us to get beyond that multiple crisis is by setting our sights on a new day, on a new spring, by embracing those beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions which rely on treating animals with kindness. At the centre of the book, 60 Harvests Left, it is the principle that now is the right time to put kindness to animals and thereby people at the centre of our society. And in so doing, we will create better lives for animals today, and we will save the future for our children tomorrow. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Philip, for this glimpse to the themes of the book that you cover in your book. And I have some questions to you, but some of them I think you already covered, but maybe we'll go a little bit back to where it started. The soil is at the center of this book. And also the title, 60 Harvests Left, is relates to that. Can you talk a little bit into detail about that? Why is it that we keep coming back to soil, and what is the story behind the title?
The story behind the title is that the soil is needed for the production of 95% of all our food. And the UN has warned that carry on like we are at the moment, that in 60 years' time, it will be game over. There will be no more food. Of course, we'll never get to that point because Farmageddon, the catastrophe, will happen way before there is no soil. It was using the soil as a metaphor for the need to get animals out of factory farms. It was an example, a real-world example of the harms that we are doing to ourselves and to our children's future by continuing to be cruel to animals. So get animals out of factory farms is a way of stopping the destruction of our children's future.
Thank you. In the book, you describe so many examples of the interconnectedness of human action to the loss of biodiversity and the variety of consequences that our action can have, kind of like a butterfly effect almost. For example, you highlight fish farming, how that causes a variety of problems. And here in Finland, fish is often hailed as the healthy and sustainable food choice, and the government wants to triple fish farming by 2030. Can you go into a little bit of detail of why is fish farming bad for our planet and for biodiversity for us all?
Absolutely. Well, I wish I had a picture to show you of a beautiful African penguin. These are the most wonderful creatures that I've had the pleasure to see on many occasions. Fantastic birds that used to be the most numerous seabird off the coast of Africa. There were many millions of them. Now they're down to just a few thousand, and the African penguin will be extinct, or is on course to be extinct by 2035, within just 10 years. The reason for that is due to overfishing, but not overfishing to feed people, overfishing to feed fish farms. What people often don't realise is that fish farms don't produce fish for free. They're usually producing carnivorous species like salmon, trout, sea bass, sea bream, and to feed those, trawlers go out and scoop up huge amounts of small fish like anchovies and sardines and so on, that are then ground down and into fish meal to feed farmed fish, pigs and poultry. So there used to be an attitude of so what, because these small fish, well, no one eats them anyway, so we might as well use them as animal feed. Well, the problem is, once you get any idea of what happens in an ecosystem, you can see that the big fish that we rely on, they eat the small fish, who eat the phytoplankton and so on. And it's a food chain. So if we want the big fish that we're overfishing to rebound, then we better leave the small fish alone. So the African penguin feeds on the small fish. The reason why I'm giving them as an example is because they're a very colourful, real-world example of a species that used to be hugely abundant, that is now 10 years from extinction because we're overfishing small fish to feed to farmed fish. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And thank you for explaining this. And you do this a lot in your book, where you explain these sort of interconnected things that you don't necessarily really realize until you read it really clearly describes that. I work for an animal rights organization. I know fish farming is bad for the fish, for their rights and for their welfare, and of course it has consequences also elsewhere. But then you don't necessarily think it through all the way to the penguins. So I challenge everyone watching and listening to think about the penguins if they are considering the farmed salmon, for example, in the shop, which is very, very popular food here in Finland. Another popular food and another sort of a bad guy in factory is the factory farmed chicken, aka the broiler chicken, that is eaten, and that's another animal that in Finland is marketed as a healthy, climate-friendly food, and the industry sees potential for increase, even though already 80 million broiler chickens suffer and are killed in Finnish factories every year. Apart from the obvious suffering of the animals, and sorry, I'm bringing these very particular examples, but I think they really well illustrate what this book is about, where you really explain the practicalities of it. So apart from the obvious suffering of the chickens, why is this factory farming of broiler chickens a problem?
Oh, it's a big problem for a whole bunch of reasons. One is that chicken factory farming is fat meat production. Essentially, keeping chickens in factory farms the way that we do means that they produce a lot of fat in the system, and they're actually carrying 3 times more fat now than they were 50 years ago when factory farming, when chicken production started to commercialize. So they're carrying more fat and less health-giving nutrients than they were in decades past. The other thing is that factory farming of chickens is very intense in using the kind of crops, soya, corn, wheat, and fish meal, and so it's a big contributor to the decline in the wider environment, be it fish stocks or the soil or biodiversity, or indeed carbon. You see, one of the things which is often overlooked, and I tried to bring forward in the book, is that the soil is really important for capturing carbon. The soil, the world's soil holds nearly twice as much carbon as the entire atmosphere. So it's a big carbon sink. But by growing crops industrially, we're destroying the soil and helping it to release carbon into the atmosphere instead of taking it out. So by keeping chickens in factory farms, the way that we produce their feed releases carbon into the atmosphere rather than captures it. We should remember that chicken is a big part of the overall industrial animal agriculture, and that animal agriculture worldwide produces more greenhouse gas emissions than all of the world's planes, trains, and cars put together. So factory farming is not only a big emitter of greenhouse gases, it also takes away the opportunity to absorb a lot of carbon into the soil. And these were the kind of connections that I was trying to bring together in the book. And I'll tell you for why. You were saying that you run a fantastic organization, actually, a fantastic organization in Animalia, and I'm a big admirer of the work that you do. And we as an animal welfare, animal rights community, I know, because I've been involved more than 40 years. 40 years ago, the message was very much, please be kind to animals. Please be kind to them because it's the right thing to do. Now, what I'm trying to show through Farmageddon, through Dead Zone, and now 60 Harvests Left, is that we've got to stop pleading to be kind to animals. We've got to be kind to animals, because if we don't, that's it for us. The interconnections are many. The interconnections are serious. That this is about our health, our environment, our future. So please be kind to ourselves, which means we have to be kind to animals. So let kindness be the abiding principle at the center of our society for now and the future.
Hear, hear. And of course, this is something we have also been doing here in Finland for years and years. trying to plead to that sense of kindness and the sense of what's ethical, what's right, and now these reasons that are actually affecting us as people, our health, our opportunities to live on a nice planet. These are actually becoming the strong reasons then that the bigger population will hopefully turn into kindness. You're correct there that we have to stop pleading, and it's obvious that we have to change. You already touched upon your recipe for a better future in your presentations, the 3 R's. Would you like to go a little bit more into detail and talk a little bit more about those 3 aspects?
Yeah, well, the 3 R's, regeneration, rethinking protein, and rewilding the soil, are very much about getting our food system back in balance. It's about getting animals out of factory farms and back to the land as part of mixed rotational farms, where they can turbo boost the revitalization of our soil. At a time when a third of our soil is already declined, and in 15 years' time, another third will be gone. You can see that the trajectory is not very good. And so we do need to do things differently. And I believe that therefore, being kind to animals is therefore going to be kind to the soil. Keeping the animals in much better regenerative organic systems is the best way to go. It is the best way to feed the world today and into the future. And it also means that we've got to rein in globally our meat consumption, because we're already eating more meat than the planet can sustain. So there's 2 things need to happen. 1, change the way that we produce food, the way that we treat animals. Second, reduce the amount of meat and dairy that we eat. And what I tried to do with the book is I tried to make the associations, the 3 R's, as a simple way to show the interconnections between the food we eat and the planet we live on and the future for all of us. I tried to do that through storytelling. So there are strong stories in there, I'd like to think, that bring these things to life. It's not a textbook, it's a storybook. But also what I wanted to do was make it so that it was clear enough that people who wanted to advocate for a better world can use the book to arm themselves with the facts in a way which is easy to absorb. So arm yourselves with the facts and come out fighting for that better world for animals, people and the planet.
Thank you, and really I can attest to it being very, very nicely storytellingly written book, and I want to also express some appreciation to the translator, Johanna Koskinen. She couldn't be here today, but she has done a really good job in translating this into Finnish and making it really, I don't know if I can say easy reading, but pleasant to read because of the storytelling that's going on there and the whole. Very, very well translated, so a pleasant read in Finnish. I had a few more questions, and one of them relates to this, the recipe for better future and the solutions. That what can we as individuals, as consumers or citizens, do to make a change?
The great news is that we all have the power of our plate that we can seize 3 times a day. through our food choices. So we can make a big difference by choosing to eat more plants. And if we eat meat, eat less and better meat and dairy. And by that, I mean from regenerative and organic and pasture-fed sources, free range, so non-factory farming. So choosing to eat more kindly, to eat more plants is really important, and also to get behind organizations like Animalia and Compassion in World Farming and join that movement advocating for putting kindness at the center of our society.
Great, thank you. Did you have, I mean, you had already written Farmageddon and Dead Zone before this book, but so you must have had a clear idea where you wanted to go when you started, but was there some big realization during the process that you had?
Oh, I think each book is built on the last. In the Farmageddon was very much a travelogue. It was very much a travelogue that was different to anyone else, in that I know many travel journalists and travel writers that write about going to places and talking about the wonderful food or the fantastic culture or the beautiful scenery. I travelled the world with a journalist, Isabel Oakeshott, who was the political editor of the Times, the Sunday Times, back then. And our way of traveloguing was to go out and see the world's worst factory farms. So that was Farmageddon. It was a storytelling take on bringing to bear the world's worst factory farms. What I learned from that first book was the impact that this factory farming was having on wildlife, which is what Dead Zone was about. It was about talking about wildlife such as barn owls and jaguars and elephants, and how we can bring them back through those beautiful life-affirming solutions. And 60 Harvests Left really was a book where I wanted to bring it all together and show that we as a society, our future is built on a contract that our forefathers and mothers signed 10,000 years ago. You see, 10,000 years ago, our species were hunter-gatherers. And 10,000 years ago, we decided that hunter-gathering really was too much like hard work, and we were going to settle down and be agriculturalists. We're going to be farmers. And in doing so, we started to create the framework for societies and culture and all of these things. But we did it by signing a contract with the soil, which is, if we look after the soil on which our society depends will look after us. And then, just after the Second World War, a single human lifetime ago, humanity started to tear up that contract. It took animals off of the land and put them in factory farms. It started to use chemical pesticides and fertilizers to grow the crops, largely to feed factory farmed animals. And that this mismatch is now leading to our undoing. So what I wanted to do with this third book in the trilogy was to bring all the strands together in a book that you can read alone. You don't have to read the previous ones. This one says it all, and I think says it better than the previous two, in that there are these beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions, simple things at hand that we can do to save our future. That was my journey.
Great. I have one last question, which nicely relates to the journey thought. what do you hope from the future? From your future, do you have plans for your next books, or other plans than coming to Helsinki in October, and more generally in this theme?
Well, I'm so looking forward to the autumn, to being with you all in Finland. Very much looking forward to that a great deal. I think if I were to write another book, then what I would do is I would change the theme. Not what's at the centre of all my writing, or at the centre of all my writing and all of the work of Animalia is animals and the need to be kind to them. That theme would remain, but what I would do is I would tell it differently. So I've written 3 books: Farmageddon, Dead Zone, and 60 Harvests Left. 60 Harvests Left, a big part of it is a celebration of the good things we can do. And what I would like to do going forward is to focus on those good things that we can do and celebrate the wonderful ways in which we can bring better lives to animals, and in so doing enhance the future for all of us.
That sounds excellent, and it'll be a pleasure to read that book also. We have some minutes left to see if we have some questions from the audience, and if anyone wants to ask their question in Finnish, I can translate into English. We have a microphone here. Please speak to the microphone so that Philip can also hear you and it gets streamed. So we have one question.
So you have been speaking about these things to politicians and all kinds of people who have power. And what have you learned about the system, how countries are governed, or how people in big business firms think about these things? And why is it so difficult to change the systems we live in? And what brings hope for that change?
Question. Thank you so much. Well, I'll start with what makes it so difficult. What makes it so difficult are the vested interests. And I go into this in the book in that there are huge companies that their entire revenues are built around keeping us doing the wrong thing, keeping us being cruel to animals and farming in ways which destroy the soil. So that's the vested interest, the things which have locked us in to what is happening at the moment. Talking to politicians and governments and companies, I find that the best way to get them to listen and to engage is to try to find win-win solutions, ways which can help farmers, help animals, help consumers. And that was something which particularly I learned from during the strategic dialogue in Brussels that I mentioned. I mentioned in my presentation the report commissioned by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. That was the strategic dialogue on the future of EU agriculture, and I was the only animal welfare spokesperson. I was there because of my role as president of Eurogroup for Animals. I was in a room with 29 others. They were farming and food industry leaders in the main, and I had to try and find a way to get them to agree that we needed to improve the way that we treated animals. And the only way to do that, because the report had to be on consensus, had to be by consensus, the only way to get them to agree was to show them what was in it for farmers, for companies, for consumers. So looking for those double wins, those triple wins was the way forward. And my hope is that people better see the interconnections between the way we treat animals, the impact on the environment, what that does to our health, and what it's doing to our future. And thereby, they're better able to see that doing wrong to animals is the reverse to that is that being kind to animals is the right thing to do for all our sakes. So a triple win for animals, people, and the planet. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Philip. Do we have any other questions? Yes, hold on, we get the microphone there.
Thank you. I was wondering, I haven't read this book. I haven't actually read any of your books, but I'm very interested now. Thank you very much. But this sounds very familiar. I recently read George Monbiot's Read Genesis, and I think he makes many very similar arguments. And I'm wondering, I'm sure you're familiar with his work, and I'm wondering whether you agree on all points or whether there's something that you see very differently. I see that you come from kind of different, like somewhat different backgrounds in the sense that you talk more of animal welfare and compassion and kindness, and he talks more about rewilding aspects. But in the end, you seem to come to very many similar conclusions. So I'm wondering, if this is kind of more or less the same book from a different angle. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And yeah, George Monbiot and I did talk during the formulation of both our books. In fact, George features in my book 60 Harvests Left, and we come to similar conclusions, not the same, but similar conclusions. And I think where we differ, I would say, is that I sought to find a way which brought everyone with us. That's what I would say. I was looking to make sure that the solutions, regeneration, rethinking protein, and rewilding the soil were written in a way which can unite people, unite all readers from wherever you're coming from behind the cause which my book was written for, which is to help animals. And I think that was the difference, that 60 Harvests Left is written from the perspective of how do we best help animals for the future.
Thank you. We have at least one more question?
Hello, Philip. This is Francisco from the Wolf Action Group. Thank you for your book. It's really both heart-wrenching and hopeful at the same time, with all the solutions, the life-affirming stories that you give. You touched on it briefly on the book, and I wanted to ask you if you could share more your thoughts on cultivated meat, as it seems to be the game-changing innovation that perhaps it's not yet fully taken on board by the big decision makers and the big investors. So what do you think needs to happen that it takes off in general in society and in the industry?
Cisco, thank you. Thank you so much for your question, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. Brilliant work to stand up for wolves, which is truly heroic work. Thank you for the question on cultivated meat. So cultivated meat, of course, being meat that is created from growing stem cells in a bioreactor. And it produces real meat, but without the animal slaughter. And as Francisco, you know very well, it produces that real meat without the animal slaughter, using a fraction of the land. It saves 98% of the land that would be used for the equivalent in say, beef. produced from living from growing and killing animals. It has much less impact on the climate and on water and so on. So it really is a game changer. But it's being held up. It's being held up because it needs regulatory approval. In many countries, it's been approved for particular companies in Singapore, in the United States, in Israel, and in the UK. Here is the first ever, let me just turn that round, the first ever pet food for using cultivated meat. And so I have in my hand cultivated meat. Our beautiful dog, Bruce, has been trying this in the last few days. And I'll be writing about that in my column in the Scotsman newspaper in a couple of weeks' time. So cultivated meat is something which very much I would encourage companies and governments to get behind because it really is a game changer. It needs much greater investment. But here you have a catch-22 in that investors don't want to put a lot of money into something that hasn't yet got regulatory approval because they need to see a return on their money. So there is a catch-22 there, particularly in the European Union, where cultivated meat hasn't yet been given the go-ahead in any shape or form. But to put no finer point on it, why am I an advocate of cultivated meat? Because I think it is the renewable energy equivalent for food. What do I mean by that is that people generally are eating more meat today than they ever have done worldwide. More people eating more meat. And so people want to eat meat, generally speaking. So we can try and convince them to eat plant-based meats, which is a very good way to go, and I totally agree with that. Or we can give them meat, but produced differently. So with renewable energy, the energy may be produced using wind turbines or other ways which are planet friendly. But when you go to use it as a consumer, you just put your plug in the wall and your device charges up naturally. You don't even know that it's produced differently. With cultivated meat, it's just like that. In that the end product is meat, just produced differently. It's a raw ingredient. And so people can hereby have meat, but without the animal slaughter and without the environmental downsides. And potentially it can be healthier too. And by the way, Bruce, our dog, he loved them.
I meant to ask what Bruce thought, so that's good. So he's given you a reference for your column then. Do we have any more questions? I think we may be out of questions now, Philip. So thank you very much for your time, for your book, for sharing your knowledge and insights. And we all look forward to seeing you in October at Helsinki Book Fair. Thank you, Philip.
Well, sincere thanks, and it remains for me to say to everyone that all of the royalties from this book and all my books actually go to the movement. They go to Compassion in World Farming. So it all helps to get the message out to be kind to animals for all our sakes. And Heidi, I'd like to thank you and Animalia and Into and everyone involved, and very much looking forward to seeing you in Finland in the autumn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Philip, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.